In this lesson, we're gonna talk about creating materials in Rhino using cycles or PBR, so physically based render and ray tracing. You're seeing right now. We're gonna talk about the basics and how we can set up the rendering with the environment and the sunlight and the skylight and the artificial light with the emissive material. So really basic operations to get started because this is something that it's about rendering, and in my opinion also here the render works pretty fine and it's also pretty quick rather than using the ray tracing, but this is the most advanced type of rendering that currently we can do in Rhino. So we need to know how to do it to finish, let's say, our work. So I'm going to use this really simplified scenes because otherwise it will get too heavy. And also what I'm going to do here is take these two and export them, export the selected into a specific file. Okay, and I'm going to create a new one just to get everything like starting from the beginning. And I'm going to import these two architecture here, and there you go. So we have a clean slate, we have few materials here. Everything is selected. When you have the yellow, it means that we are selecting the material. When you have the blue, it means it's there, but it's not selected. And so right now I'm not selecting any object with any material. And by the way, this is the materials panel. And right here, I opened up a bunch of panels because I think these are really good when you need to set up your rendering. These are really useful. And so how do you open them? We go to the render menu here, and this is where you can create also the lights. And if you go down, you have panels, and here you have materials, environments, textures. So these are to create essentially the materials you apply on the objects, and then later we're gonna talk more about the textures, but materials are made of textures. And then you have environments, which are like materials that will be put in a spherical fashion around your scene. And then you have lights. So you have artificial lights, emissive materials, and also natural lights. Natural lights, you have the sun and the sky, which also comes from the environment. And then you have additional elements of the rendering, which is like the ground plane at the bottom, and then render settings, and also libraries. Libraries is the first one I'm going to show you because this is where you can get ready-made materials, so you don't need to create one yourself, but also we're going to discover how to do them ourselves. So right here, I using materials that I can see in the material panel. So also right-click to open and close panels in this section of the interface. And also in the bottom part, we can see how this material is created. So if it's physically based, or if it's standard here from the libraries like cluster, or if it's like for Enscape, which is a render engine that we can use. It simplifies a lot everything. And again, if it's metal or plastic or a glass, or etc., etc. Now, in the previous video, we talked about how to set up a landscape and landscape design, landscape objects. Now, unless you're using again Twinmotion or Enscape or a specific render engine, it's really difficult to create large scene in Rhino, really big scenes with a lot of objects and a lot of trees and people and cars and everything. Now for that, I usually use other software. And just quickly, I'm going to show you, this is an Enscape file, and all the trees and the cars and the people, these are all proxies, so that the scene stays really light and it's not so heavy, so I can move around, change materials, etc., etc. And I will render this using Enscape. So it's going to be really easy, really fast, and also not so heavy as rendering with ray tracing, which is really, really heavy. But this is shown in the Enscape course. So if you're interested, you can go and check it out. Now, other possibilities are like Twinmotion, Unreal Engine, Lumion. These are all for, especially for exteriors, for large and complex scenes with a lot of objects that will get stuck in ray tracing. They also have ray tracing options, like also V-Ray, etc., etc. But in general, for really big scenes, unless you have a really strong computer, you may want to go and simplify it. And they all use like video game logic to create real-time renderings. Now here I also want to show you a couple of assets that I can download and import using Sketchfab, because if you're not using Enscape or Twinmotion, for example, you won't have like libraries of objects that you can put, so you need to create them or download them and insert it into your scene. So I've selected a couple here. Before we talk about the materials, they come also with the materials. So I selected this maple tree from this author. You need to register in SketchUp if you want to, sorry, Sketchfab, if you want to download these models. So once you are logged in, you can go here and download. You can see this has DAE format. Not every format will be available in Rhino. So if this doesn't work, you can get the GLTF, which always work and also contains the material, so it's perfect. And so every time I don't find this a good format, I go with the GLTF. And also this one here, which is a snowy terrain. It's another way you can construct a terrain. You can just import it. And there are other software to create terrains as well. So also this has its own author, and this is OBJ, which is fine. But again, I would prefer GLTF, so I make sure that I also have the texture. Okay, and then we're gonna proceed and talk about PBR, or physically based render materials and lights and render, etc., etc. When you download from Sketchfab, you will find a zip folder in your download. So you can just extract the content into another folder or just right click and extract. But I already extracted, so this is the maple tree. Now trees are really heavy, and again, all these are pretty heavy in Rhino. So I can click and drag and import, or I can maintain that linked. And in SketchUp, you also find information about how many polygons an object contains. And usually trees are the heaviest thing you could use together, again, with people and vehicles and things like that. And this is too big, so I'm just gonna scale it down so that it becomes a correct size. And this is now a really light scene, so this is why it's going, okay, but I guarantee that if you start to put like 10 trees, well, things are gonna get nasty. And if I render, here I can see the material being applied to that tree, which is not working properly. I need to fix it because I should have like a cutout effect here on these leaves, and it goes really, really slow. It gets easily stuck. So I'm gonna pause this right here, and I just wanted to show how to import assets from the exterior. But again, be careful with that. Use low poly geometry mostly. And if I want to see the material here that this one is using, I will go directly to properties, select one leaf, go into material tab, and you can see this is using now physically based material. So that's the most advanced, and it's using textures. And we probably have a problem with, well, you don't need emission for this, so definitely turn off emission. You can delete channels here and textures. So this is how a material looks like. We have a bunch of layers with a bunch of effects, and we can call them maps. We can call them channels. So also I won't use the ambient occlusion, and it doesn't have here the one that it actually needs, which is cutout or opacity or transparency. Probably there's no need of metallic also here information, because this is not a metal, so we probably don't want that. So it's going to be 0 metal. And then we can go in the detail settings and add more. And in this case, I would go and search for a cutting channel, like the opacity. And probably there is a texture here that hasn't been imported. So there you go, alpha. And we add a new texture. And we need to pick the texture either from here, or we needed to get from the exterior. So I'm going to go to bitmap, texture, and navigate where I saved these files. So in the Sketchfab folder, maple tree, textures, and it should be there.